In one of the more perplexing Greek myths, Zeus and Hera are arguing over who experiences more sexual pleasure, men or women. Not surprisingly, they cannot agree. So they ask Tiresias, the blind prophet of Apollo, a man who spent 7 years of his life as a woman. He actually even had a child. Tiresias does not hesitate. Of 10 parts, a man enjoys one only. Sorry, man. Hera, however, rather than delighted, is furious, and to punish him strikes him blind. So why is Hera so angry? Why does she see a betrayal? The way I like to see this is that Hera is pissed at Tiresias because he's translating female pleasure into a male language. And that usually gives us pornography, or at best those beautiful paintings and sculptures of female nudes laid out for the male gaze and desire. These days we talk about sexual politics a lot, not so much about pleasure. The taboos about pleasure persist, especially when we're talking about female pleasure, and we're talking about it as women. And that is what Carolee Schneemann did. When she began to create work about the erotics of female pleasure, she was an anomaly. She was not taken seriously. This was in the 60s, years before the height of second-wave feminist art production. In her 1967 film Fuses, Schneemann filmed the erotic intimacy of her relationship with James Tenney, as observed by their cat, Kitch. Carolee deliberately sidesteps the conventions of pornography, both through shifting the filming viewpoint and in post-production by staining, burning, and directly drawing on the celluloid itself, mixing painting and collage. So here's a short video where Carolee herself talks about the film.
What impact did the culture put on my gender as an artist? I was an anomaly. I was ridiculous. I was inappropriate. I didn't know my place. I was imperious. I was very gifted, but don't expect to do anything about it or with it. I think I started shooting Fuses in 65. 64, 65, 65 for sure, upstate in the old house. Foot reels that had to be sent to Pittsburgh in case there was something pornographic, with a letter accompanying every 100 reel that said, this work is a study of the archetypal cross. And that had to come from a psychiatrist because the FBI was going through labs. So I would send out a reel, I didn't even know what was on it. And it had to have this letter in case there was some erotic imagery. I had never seen any form of a lived erotics depicted that was close to my lived experience. There was, as I always explain, in the early 60s, female sexuality existed only as pornography or a medical consideration. And what your lived experience was secret and off the screen.
Thank you, Kathy Brew, for this video. In 1969, when Fuses screened at Cannes, some 40 men went berserk and tore up the seats in the theater. They slashed them with razors and threw all the padding around. Nevertheless, the film won the Special Jury Selection Prize. 20 years later, after winning in Cannes, Fuse provoked a small riot in Moscow and was censored for pornographic content. So the wall doesn't divide those things. It's like across the board. But at a screening at the University of Massachusetts in 1973, the complaint was that there wasn't enough pornographic content. A man in the audience said he didn't get a hard-on, so what's the point? And a woman responded, you didn't get a hard-on because you wouldn't recognize something that was truly sexual if it sat in your lap. The fight escalated. Professors were banging on the table, students were yelling, and somebody hit the man on the head with a newspaper. So they finally asked Carolee, "What do you think about the audience fighting?" And she said, "Well, it seems to be very cathartic for you. It's better than struggling over dull academic questions." Throughout her creative career, Carolee continued to explore why certain imagery angers and disturbs. She was interested in taboos of all kinds: sexuality and body fluids, bestiality and witchcraft trials, but also rituals of war and political violence. What she herself summarized as the old Eros and Thanatos. She made a film about atrocities in Vietnam and an installation responding to the destruction of Palestinian communities in Beirut and refugee camps in southern Lebanon. Her work often upset audiences. As a result, she was censored, and even more often, she was rejected and sidelined. As late as 2002, an East Hampton museum censored photo documentation from a performance Carolee had done there almost 30 years earlier, in 1975, called Interior Scroll, a legendary performance in which she read naked from a text written on a scroll of paper that she pulled out of her vagina. Apparently, trustees in 2002 found the documentation itself offensive. The curator of the entire show, called Personal and Political, the Women's Art Movement, 1969-1975, was fired midway through the show. But Carolee was no victim. Censorship never deterred her. On the contrary, it signaled that she was on the right track. Her vitality, her joy, her courage, her passion for freedom survive in her work, which in the last decades of her life finally got the recognition necessary to reach wide audiences. For this award, we asked members of the arts community to co-sign a tribute to Carolee's pioneering vision and radical impact, and the response was overwhelming. Wendy Olsoff, who is here to receive the award on behalf of Carolee's estate, is one of the people responsible for that recognition. Wendy is the co-founder of PPOW, a New York art gallery, which since 1983 has given a home to many artists whose politically powerful work has been rejected, defunded, or otherwise deprived of public exposure. And this requires courage and conviction. As Carolee told me in a 2004 interview, radical exhibits can redefine a gallery, marginalize it, separate it from conservative collectors, critics, or acquisition committees. So it is wonderful to have PPOW thrive after all these years, and also that Wendy's here with us to accept the award and celebrate Carolee's life and work. Thank you.